Number 1. Life in a severe crisis. Cuba, a country known for its slow pace in the modern world, still maintains a distinct rhythm of life, closely tied to its past. Havana, the political center and cultural heart of Cuba, is home to approximately 2.5 million people, all residing in historic neighborhoods steeped in Soviet architecture. For decades, the Cuban economy has struggled with persistent crises, as the centralized management model has made life difficult and challenging for its citizens. Particularly in the suburbs, many families still rely on informal trading networks to access food and essential necessities, even resorting to black markets. For example, some areas of Havana still have unusual markets where everything from medicine to food is traded through informal transactions. In some older residential areas of Havana, it is not uncommon to see 3 generations living together in a cramped apartment, a stark reflection of the severe shortage of living space amidst a struggling economy. While the average income of Cubans remains very low, the prices of food and consumer goods continue to rise. Access to medicine is particularly difficult, with supplies largely coming from other countries in limited quantities. A characteristic image of Cuba is families lining up from early morning to exchange food ration coupons, where a single coupon can buy only enough rice and cooking oil for a few days. From late 2024 to 2025, life in Cuba became even more stressful, with successive power outages lasting 15 to 20 hours each day. And in October 2024, nearly a week of widespread blackouts brought almost all activities to a standstill. Images of neighborhoods relying on shared generators have become commonplace. Many gas stations are constantly crowded, and people wait for hours to refuel. Although measures like food rationing remain in place, scarcity is more evident than ever. As of August 2025, this situation shows no sign of abating. The daily lives of Cubans are no longer simply about survival. They are a test of resilience, patience, and adaptability in a constantly changing society. To cope with shortages, people have devised ways of communal living, such as organizing communal meals to save fuel and share food, a way to survive through difficult times. Growing their own vegetables, supporting each other through informal channels, and fighting daily hardships together have become integral parts of their lives. Number 2. Cuba's prosperity before 1959. Before 1959, Cuba was one of the most prosperous economies in Latin America, with Havana at its center. Dubbed the Las Vegas of the Caribbean, the city boasted luxury hotels, opulent casinos, bars, and nightclubs that attracted significant investment from the United States. It was particularly popular with business people, wealthy tourists, and American mafia groups, creating a vibrant entertainment scene where jazz, rumba, and salsa music echoed through the neon lights at night. The famous hotels along Malecon Avenue were meeting places for the international elite, where investors, artists, and playboys created a renowned entertainment hub, not only for Cuba, but for the entire Caribbean. Havana became a symbol of extravagance, where wealth and prosperity intertwined with music and the joys of life. In the 1950s, Cuba's GDP per capita was among the highest in the region, and public services such as education, healthcare, and transportation were considered advanced, surpassing those of neighboring countries. However, the Cuban economy was heavily reliant on the sugar industry, with over 60% of national income coming from sugar exports. Sugar plantations and processing plants were owned by foreign corporations and a small number of domestic elites, meaning profits flowed primarily into the hands of the wealthy. While Havana and several major cities experienced rapid development, rural Cuba suffered from poverty, where farmers did not benefit from these economic gains. In reality, Cuba had become a highly stratified society, with a small elite holding the majority of wealth and economic power. Rural areas still lack basic services, job opportunities, and a significantly lower standard of living compared to urban areas. In particular, dependence on the U.S. market made the Cuban economy fragile and vulnerable to external fluctuations. In the late 1950s, the sharp drop in world sugar prices caused significant fluctuations in Cuban farmers' incomes, plunging them into crisis. This created social discontent, especially in rural areas, where income and social rights inequalities became increasingly apparent. The gap between rich and poor widened, and these contradictions fueled the widespread political upheavals that followed. Number 3. The wealth gap in Havana. Cuba's national power grid is facing serious issues. In October 2024, the entire country experienced a blackout lasting nearly a week, plunging Cuba into darkness for 7 consecutive days. Just months later, in May 2025, power outages occurred again in Havana and many other areas, with outages lasting up to 20 hours a day becoming a regular occurrence. This created serious challenges for hospitals in maintaining emergency services and prevented children from attending school. Many families reverted to cooking with charcoal instead of gas stoves. These problems were worsened by recurring natural disasters. Hurricane Idalia in 2023 damaged over 2,000 homes and more than 5,000 hectares of farmland. The prolonged drought in Camagüey and Ciego de Ávila reduced maize, bean, and sugarcane yields by 40%. Other storms like Oscar and Rafael caused additional damage, flooding, and widespread power outages. Since October 2024, power outages became more frequent due to fuel shortages and deteriorating infrastructure. Fuel shortages also paralyzed transportation, with nearly half of public buses out of service, hindering the delivery of goods and medicine. Food production plummeted, falling to half of previous levels. In 2025, shortages of imported goods caused rice, cooking oil, and meat prices to rise by 15 to 30%, forcing many families to rely on aid or grow their own vegetables. The Cuban peso continues to weaken, and the black market exchange rate is 400 pesos to $1, driving inflation to about 30%. Around 40% of Cubans lack access to foreign currency, preventing them from purchasing essential goods. A 2024 report found that 89% of the Cuban population lives in extreme poverty, earning just $10 to $40 per month. In Havana, food rations per person include 2 kilos of rice, half a kilo of black beans, a small amount of chicken, and just over 2 kilos of sugar. Children under 1 year old receive only 1 liter of milk per month, with families needing to pay for the rest at high prices. Agricultural products and meat are sold through state-run entities at government-regulated prices, while private businesses are severely restricted. Those who slaughter cattle without a license can face lengthy prison sentences. The divisions between areas in Havana are clear. Vedado and Miramar have spacious homes, while Centro Havana and Old Havana are cramped and dilapidated, where multiple generations live in small spaces. For many Cubans, all these hardships are believed to be a consequence of the international embargo. Number 4. Exploring entertainment options in Cuba. Unlike the well-planned entertainment districts of Hamburg in Germany or Pattaya in Thailand, Cuba operates in a very unique way. You won't find brightly lit streets or concentrated entertainment areas. Instead, you'll find a space similar to an old town, where groups of women are scattered at various points rather than gathering in one specific area. Observations from urban tourism indicate that this activity mainly takes place in central squares and streets frequented by international tourists, especially in the old and famous neighborhoods. According to the experience of many tourists, this service is not professional or clearly organized. In Havana, services aimed at foreign visitors are not concentrated in one fixed area but are instead dispersed throughout the city, especially in the old town and the city center. Researchers studying the informal economy point out that this decentralized model offers flexibility to participants, preventing them from being dependent on a single location. Recent studies indicate that areas like Centro Havana and Old Havana have the highest density of these services, while areas like Vedado are less common. Upon noticing tourists, women providing these services often proactively approach them and introduce themselves as massage therapists, creating ambiguity between legitimate services and unsolicited offers. Some work independently, while others work at spa establishments. Because massage is legal in Cuba, many spa shops publicly display prices and offer services openly. The price for a 60-minute full-body massage is typically around $30, while a 90-minute massage costs around $40. Although this price is quite high for Cubans, whose average income ranges from only $10 to $40 per month, it is quite affordable for European tourists. Some visitors reveal that they pay extra for services beyond massages, such as meals or souvenirs, to strengthen their relationships with the women providing the services. Beyond direct payment, guests are sometimes invited to meals or receive gifts, creating an advantage that far exceeds the average Cuban income. Many visitors, especially from Europe, return frequently, forming networks of acquaintances with the women providing the services. This partly reflects the existence of informal economic forms, where the income disparity between tourists and locals creates opportunities for informal interaction and services within Cuban society. Number 5. The mysterious life of ginoteras in Cuba. In Cuba, there's a unique type of service targeting affluent clients, but its scope extends beyond privacy to include social activities. In tourist areas, visitors can hire a paid companion to participate in social activities such as dining, chatting, strolling, or attending events. Once mutual agreement is reached, this relationship can sometimes develop in a more personal way, depending on the circumstances and desires of both parties. This service is referred to by some urban anthropologists as a companionship service, emphasizing communication and companionship rather than a purely financial purpose. The women involved in this service, known as ginoteras, work in addition to their main jobs. They maintain independent personal and professional lives, but in the context of limited income, providing paid companionship becomes a crucial source of supplemental income. Some women even consider this a legitimate form of social relationship, where sharing time, conversation, and presence are more important than financial gain. In fact, many ginoteras previously worked in the hotel, restaurant, or tourism industries. But when the economy declined and incomes decreased, they turned to this work to make ends meet. Sociological research in Latin America indicates that this phenomenon is linked to the development of urban tourism in Havana, particularly in the context of economic instability. This activity mainly takes place in Havana's historical center, near hotels and entertainment venues, where the informal economy plays a significant role in people's livelihoods. Field surveys show that areas around the Old Town Square and major tourist streets are where the informal social networking is most active. Interestingly, many ginoteras not only work with strangers, but also build long-term relationships with regular clients, which helps them mitigate risks and ensure a more stable income. Maintaining these relationships not only reduces their dependence on intermediaries, but also protects them from unwanted risks in the informal economy. For many ginoteras, this is not just about earning money, but also a way to maintain social networks and adapt to difficult economic conditions. Numerous qualitative studies also indicate that ginoteras maintaining long-term relationships with clients helps them mitigate the impact of an unstable labor market, especially in an environment where formal employment is becoming increasingly difficult. Number 6. Internet by hand in Cuba. Cuba is one of the countries least dependent on the internet, especially compared to most countries in the world. Despite the increasing global trend of digital transformation, telecommunications infrastructure in Cuba remains underdeveloped, and people primarily access the internet via mobile data. Approximately 70 to 73% of the population has internet access, but the majority use public Wi-Fi rather than fixed-line internet connections at home. Internet access in Cuba is also dependent on affordability and technical conditions. For many households, the internet remains a luxury. An hour of public Wi-Fi costs around $2, while average monthly income ranges from only $17 to $30. 3G access is much more expensive, and 4G or 5G is only available in some urban areas. Many students and young workers wait until nighttime when the network is less congested, and some public Wi-Fi hotspots have become popular gathering places for people. When too many people connect simultaneously, network speeds drop dramatically, often described as slow as a turtle. While internet quality has improved, it remains significantly lower than in other Latin American countries. Therefore, watching high-quality videos or participating in online meetings frequently results in buffering, freezing, and disconnections. Some small businesses have to send work documents via USB or hard drives instead of streaming online due to high data costs and limited bandwidth. For those working remotely in Cuba, the key factor isn't equipment, but patience. App stores like the Apple App Store and Google Play don't allow Cubans to download apps directly. Therefore, for years, people have had to copy data via USB to install software. This has created an offline data sharing network where music, movies, and software files are stored and shared among friends, colleagues, and family. This model functions as a handheld internet, reflecting the creativity and adaptability of the Cuban people in the face of a lack of infrastructure and technology, as well as their ability to create their own technological solutions. Number 7. Cuba and the journey of leaving home. Cuban migration, particularly to the United States and France, has been fraught with complex legal and administrative barriers. The Cuban government imposes strict regulations on leaving the country, with cumbersome administrative procedures and high costs to maintain valid documentation and administrative ties with their homeland. Some migrants report that renewing passports and residence permits abroad is prohibitively expensive relative to their income. Even after settling abroad, Cubans face these constraints, leaving them feeling isolated and struggling to maintain ties with their homeland. Between 2022 and 2023, approximately 425,000 Cuban citizens, nearly 4% of the population, were stopped or detained by U.S. authorities while attempting to enter the country without proper documentation. This is one of the largest waves of Cuban migration in decades, occurring against a backdrop of economic decline and a deteriorating living standard in the country. This migration coincides with unemployment and rising inflation. Because visas are not required to enter Nicaragua, many Cubans choose to fly there and pay intermediary groups to continue their journey to the United States, with total costs potentially reaching $7,000 per person, while the average income in Cuba is only about $150 per month. This migration reflects both a desire for economic opportunity and adds pressure to the domestic workforce. Some regions are experiencing shortages of young workers as many working-age individuals leave the country. This massive migration has left many families torn apart and facing lasting emotional trauma. Although they carry hopes for a more stable future, many Cubans still face a perilous journey, confronting networks of migration intermediaries and the difficulties of starting a new life in a foreign country. In many cases, families maintain contact through remittances and online calls to stay connected, despite the ever-increasing geographical distance. Number 8. When traffic becomes a culture. Cuba's public transportation system is a vibrant tapestry reflecting daily urban life. Almond-colored cars and classic vehicles from the 1950s and 1960s, synonymous with Havana, are not only iconic but also function as taxis on fixed routes. Passengers sit close together, sharing the cost and distance. Throughout the journey, you'll hear the loud engine noise, feel the closeness between strangers, and witness spontaneous conversations. To keep the service running, many drivers repair and assemble their own engines, even collecting parts from various car models to create modified versions, allowing the vehicles to continue operating even when original parts are no longer readily available. In addition, Cuba has the guagua bus system. Waiting for a bus in the sweltering Caribbean heat can be challenging, but once you board, you'll feel the spirit of camaraderie and mutual support among passengers. People give up their seats to the elderly, help each other when the bus is crowded, and from these repeated daily commutes, a sense of community is formed. On some suburban routes, residents have to combine walking and multiple bus transfers, making travel time longer than the actual distance. Some studies show that this affects the working hours and productivity of suburban residents. Although tourists often choose air-conditioned taxis, Havana residents spend most of their time and effort just traveling within the city. Many carry water bottles, hand fans, or cloth bags to cope with long waits. In some residential areas, waiting for the bus in the morning becomes a space for community interaction, where people chat and share information. For them, transportation is not just a means of getting around, but also a part of urban culture, where patience, sharing, and adaptability are everyday life skills. Number 9. The bread crisis in Cuba. In Cuba, the Libre distribution card system has existed since the 1960s, aiming to ensure people have access to basic food supplies throughout the economic downturn. However, as the economy has worsened, rations for households have decreased significantly. In 2024, each Cuban citizen could only purchase 80 grams of bread per day using the Libre card, but this has now dropped to 60 grams. Some areas have even experienced periodic flour shortages, disrupting bread supplies for days at a time. In coastal provinces, people often have to queue from early morning to receive their limited bread rations, and the supply is not always consistent. Some residents shared that they have to wait 1 to 2 hours, sometimes receiving no bread at all because the daily shipment is insufficient for everyone. Because the public distribution system couldn't meet demand, many families had to buy food from street vendors or private shops at prices much higher than subsidized rates. In this situation, secret shops gradually emerged where people could buy goods from outside sources and resell them discreetly to earn extra income. Common items at these locations included cooking oil, flour, cold medicine, and antibiotics, which were scarce in official supplies. Some shops even exchanged goods instead of cash, for example, trading medicine for food or soap. These shops often operated in private homes or behind grocery stores, only conducting transactions through referrals from acquaintances to avoid risk. People turned to these shops to buy food and medicine they couldn't access through the legal system. However, these activities were still considered illegal, and if discovered, the vendors could face severe penalties. Nevertheless, many families still engage in these transactions as it is the only way to sustain themselves, given low incomes and unstable supply. For them, buying outside the system is a constant trade-off between legality and survival in daily life, where the practical decision is between enduring scarcity or being forced to participate in informal transactions. Number 10. Behind the expensive cigars. Cuban cigars have long been considered a symbol of luxury, power, and high-end craftsmanship. However, few know that behind the glamour of premium cigars like Cohiba lies a noteworthy dark side. These cigars, costing thousands of dollars, make them a product exclusively for the global elite. But this also reflects the deep inequalities in the lives of Cuban people. The production process of a standard cigar involves hundreds of steps, from selecting the tobacco leaves, aging, cutting, to the final rolling. These leaves are meticulously inspected before being delivered to the skilled artisans who have built the reputation of Cuban cigars worldwide. However, their income is not commensurate with the value of the product they create. While a cigar can sell for a high price on the international market, artisans only earn between $10 and $40 per month. Many people even have to take on extra jobs to make ends meet, as their main salary is insufficient. Cohiba, one of the most famous cigar brands, was born in the 1960s when Fidel Castro's bodyguard introduced him to a special type of cigar. Later, artisan Eduardo Rivera was invited to produce this cigar at a small factory near Havana. Since then, Cohiba has become a symbol of class and quality, exported to over 150 countries. During the Cold War, Cohiba was even used as a diplomatic gift for heads of state, contributing to strengthening Cuba's image internationally. Every year, Habanos SA organizes a 5-day cigar festival in Havana, featuring renowned brands such as Cohiba, Montecristo, and Partagas. This event attracts fans from over 70 countries, creating an atmosphere of luxury but also a stark contrast to the lives of Cubans outside the venue. At Pinar del Rio, famous for Cuba's tobacco plantations, visitors can tour the cigar rolling process and chat with artisans. However, the reality is that many tobacco-growing families still live in simple homes, dependent on the harvest and agricultural prices. Cuban cigars are a source of national cultural pride, but also a symbol of paradox. The luxury of the product is disproportionate to the lives of those who create it. Number 11. The history of U.S.-Cuba tensions. The U.S. embargo against Cuba has been a persistent storm for over 6 decades. Since its initial imposition in 1959, it has been maintained under numerous U.S. presidents, from Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy to Bill Clinton and George W. Bush. However, under Barack Obama, the measures were eased as he acknowledged the embargo was no longer as effective as before. Nevertheless, under Donald Trump and Joe Biden, restrictions have been tightened again. The root cause of the tension between the two countries stems from the 1959 Cuban Revolution, when Fidel Castro overthrew the government of Fulgencio Batista, who was supported by the U.S. After seizing power, Castro's government nationalized land, factories, and large businesses, including the assets of American companies like Texaco and United Fruit Company, without compensation. Washington considered this action illegal and refused to recognize Castro's new government. Relations between the two countries remained strained after the Bay of Pigs incident in 1961, when the CIA supported a Cuban exile group attempting to overthrow Castro, but failed. This event severely damaged the United States' prestige and further heightened tensions. Simultaneously, the Castro regime's failure to hold multi-party elections led Washington to believe that the Cuban government lacked legitimacy. Following the U.S. cuts in sugar imports and imposes trade restrictions, Cuba intensified its cooperation with the Soviet Union, receiving financial aid, energy, and military equipment. This led to the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, when the Soviet Union deployed nuclear missiles in Cuba to counter American missiles in Europe. Eventually, an arms withdrawal agreement was reached, but the U.S. maintained its embargo against Cuba. Cuba began seeking economic self-sufficiency and expanding relations with countries such as the Soviet Union, Venezuela, and China, while the United States became less dependent on Cuban goods. The embargo was so strictly enforced that in 2006, a boy who won an international art award couldn't receive a Nikon camera as his prize because more than 10% of its components were made in the US. Instead, he received a painting as a replacement. A little-known detail is that throughout the 19th century, 4 US presidents offered to buy Cuba. From Thomas Jefferson in 1808 to James K. Polk, Franklin Pierce, and William McKinley, the proposed price gradually increased over time, but all were rejected. Number 12. A friendship built through sacrifice. Cuba has always maintained a special relationship with Vietnam, a relationship that has become an important part of both nations' history. While the United States, despite its proximity to Cuba, has maintained a confrontational stance, Vietnam, though geographically distant, has offered Cuba unwavering support for decades. In August 2025, the Vietnam Red Cross launched a Vietnam-Cuba Solidarity campaign to commemorate the 65th anniversary of relations between the two countries. By October, total donations had reached approximately $25 million, an impressive figure for a developing nation like Vietnam. Numerous businesses, social organizations, and communities within the country participated in the program, demonstrating a level of connection that goes far beyond ordinary diplomatic relations. This special relationship stems from significant historical events. In 1969, upon the death of President Ho Chi Minh, Cuba declared 7 days of national mourning in his memory. Just 4 years later, while Vietnam was still reeling from the raging war, Fidel Castro visited the liberated areas of Quang Tri and pledged support to Vietnam through economic and social projects worth approximately $80 million at the time. This was not just a visit, but a demonstration of strong solidarity. For Vietnam, Cuba is ready to shed its own blood. Notable support projects included the Thang Loi Hotel in Hanoi, the Moc Chau Dairy Farm, the Luong Mai Chicken Farm, and a 500-bed hospital in Dong Hoi, which served thousands of patients for many years. Cuba also provided medical equipment and sent experts to help restore roads, bridges, and infrastructure. In the healthcare sector, Cuba trained a large number of Vietnamese doctors and provided vaccines when Vietnam faced supply shortages, contributing to a reduction in child mortality rates. When Vietnam faced embargoes and economic hardship in the 1980s and 1990s, Cuba continued to send food, medicine, and humanitarian aid. This relationship continues to this day, not only through aid programs, but also through cooperation in education, health, and agriculture. Number 13. Restaurant services in Cuba. When visiting a restaurant in Cuba, tourists shouldn't expect the warm welcome or fast service found in international tourist destinations. In fact, many visitors have noted a somewhat cold service attitude, which can be surprising for those accustomed to high service standards. While some restaurants catering to international customers have well-trained staff, these establishments don't make up the majority. Independent travel reviews indicate that good restaurants are concentrated in central areas and are mostly privately owned. In areas further from the center, many eateries maintain a traditional style, lacking modern facilities and equipment. The quality of service at Cuban restaurants often falls short of expectations. This stems from limited resources, unstable working conditions, and insufficient wages. Waitstaff often share that they work long hours but earn just enough to cover basic living expenses. This makes the job more of an obligation than a service focused on customer experience. Many state-run restaurants still employ rigid and inflexible work schedules, while inconsistent food supplies lead to daily menu changes. Some days, customers have to wait a long time for their food due to ingredient shortages or inconsistent food quality. Economic instability also directly impacts service methods and aspects of the service process. Adjusting dishes or changing ingredients due to shortages can cause customers to wait longer. The relationship between economic conditions and service quality in the Cuban culinary industry shows that service work is not only about professional skills, but also linked to the ability to maintain resources and the stability of restaurant establishments. Number 14. Things tourists should know. Cuba offers visitors a blend of classic and unique experiences with its colonial architecture, verdant streets, and the slow pace of life characteristic of Havana. However, it is also a country with unique economic conditions and infrastructure. So a perfect trip requires careful preparation. Visitors should carry cash, especially US dollars or euros, as international card payments in Cuba are limited and many private shops do not accept cards. ATMs are sometimes out of service, making cash payments the primary method. Exchanging money at official counters also helps avoid the risks of fluctuating exchange rates in the free market. Some visitors also carry small denominations of 1 to 10 USD for convenience at local shops or when using short-term transportation services. Consumer goods are not always readily available, so visitors should prepare personal items such as basic medicines, toothpaste, and portable power banks. In terms of internet connectivity, speeds in Cuba are often slow and depend on public Wi-Fi or hotel networks. Therefore, downloading offline maps, e-tickets, and itineraries in advance is a helpful way to make your trip more convenient. Many travelers also save hotel information, phone numbers, and addresses in Spanish to avoid problems if they lose mobile connectivity. In daily life, many services still operate in a traditional way. Classic taxis, shared taxis, and buses can be quite slow, so travelers should ask for the price before getting in and bring their own water, especially in the hot summer weather. Culturally, Cuba places great importance on community and shared spaces. Therefore, travelers should dress respectfully when visiting museums, memorials, or sacred spaces. When taking photos of people or government buildings, travelers should ask permission beforehand to avoid misunderstandings. In some historical areas, security may request that filming be prohibited, so paying attention to signs and following instructions is crucial. Cuba is not just a tourist destination, but also a profound experience of its way of life, history, and the resilience of its people in the face of adversity. Being well prepared for these aspects will make the trip much easier and more enjoyable. Number 15. The living cost. Cuba isn't an overly expensive destination for international tourists, but its unique economy and distinct currency system mean costs can be higher than in many other Latin American countries. A trip to Cuba inevitably involves basic expenses, such as airfare, mandatory travel insurance, and an entry travel permit. Depending on the time and departure point, round-trip airfare to Havana can range from $500 to $900, while travel insurance for a short trip typically costs between $25 and $40. When it comes to accommodation, choices directly impact costs. In state-owned hotels in central Havana, rooms usually range from $90 to $200 per night, with standard amenities. However, many travelers opt for casa particular, a type of private hostel popular with those who appreciate freedom and friendliness. Accommodation prices at these guest houses typically range from $20 to $45 per night, depending on location and amenities. Some host families even offer breakfast for $5 to $8 per person, providing travelers with more affordable options throughout their trip. Food costs in Cuba vary depending on the restaurant you choose. At local restaurants like Paladar, a meal might only cost $3 to $6. However, restaurants catering to tourists are significantly more expensive, ranging from $10 to $20 for a full meal. Popular drinks like coffee, sugarcane juice, and fruit smoothies are quite affordable, costing between $1 and $3 per glass. One point to note is the cost of transportation in Cuba. Tourist taxis can cost between $8 and $20 for short trips within central Havana. However, classic taxis on fixed routes are much cheaper, ranging from $1 to $3 per trip. For intercity travel, the Via Azul bus is a popular option, costing between $15 and $30 for popular routes like Havana, Vinales or Havana, Trinidad. Internet access in Cuba also has its own unique characteristics. Public Wi-Fi cards cost between $1 and $2 per hour and are often only available at telecommunications service counters or hotels. This creates some inconvenience for tourists, as internet access isn't as readily available as in many other places. Some museums and tourist sites charge an entrance fee, ranging from $3 to $10, while heritage or rural tours cost between $20 and $60 per trip. In short, the average budget for a tourist in Cuba can range from $50 to $100 per day, not including airfare. This will vary depending on factors such as each traveler's travel style, accommodation choices, eating habits, and mode of transportation. And that concludes our exploration of Cuba. What do you think of the customs and life here? Let us know in the comments if you enjoyed this content. Don't forget to like it, as that really helps the channel grow and bring you more amazing videos like this. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe and turn on notifications because there are always new destinations to discover and amazing stories to tell. See you in the next video.